So there's a couple of other things we might want here. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to look at how we would troubleshoot some of these things. So let's say I had an issue where I was looking for errors. We saw an error early on, and I just actually saw that it hadn't set up the mutual TLS tunnels yet, and that's why we were having some timeout. But if I go in here and say I want to look at our product page, right, and I want to find the traces. Now what I've done is I've said, okay, the status code is true here, but error also is true. I could look for that. So I could see pages that were errored out, but still had given me a successful status message. Well, I didn't see any of those over here in my Grafana, right? If you looked, we saw a 100% success rate, so I wasn't going to find any packets if I had looked for error equals true or something like that. So I'm just looking at packets. I can see when the packets came in. I can see who's calling what. I can look at my time graph here, but I can actually go down and look at each packet itself, right? And I can see what's being called. This is just my traffic generation. I went in here and I looked at 2 calls to the reviews pages, right? And 1 call to the ratings, and how many milliseconds it took to get that response back. You know, what does my overall page build look like here? 42.3 milliseconds. Of that, most of the time was spent building the product page. It called out and got some details and loaded those in, and then it called out for the reviews, figured out which version of the reviews to get, and got the ratings back as well, built the page and returned it to me. So I can actually dive in with this freely included tool, and I can see as the service, so my service is hitting the ingress gateway, returning the product page built from the details, reviews, and ratings piece, how long it took overall, where things timed out. So it's just a good way to dig in if you have any issues, to go in and, you know, see where you may have delays being built up here in the system. So this one obviously took longer, 447 milliseconds. I wonder why that is. I wonder what took so long there. Let's go in. We see that we had our ratings and our reviews back, but to return the page took 447.57 milliseconds. So very interesting. I wonder why that took so long to do. I might want to dig into that and see. So just a real quick duration. You can see if something took over 500 microseconds, let's say. You can look at the top 20 results, those types of things. But you can actually go in and say what my tags are. So say, for example, error equals true. I can look at that, and I can see what's going on. So an easy way to search the dependencies graph is what's calling what. Let's see if I could zoom into that. I really don't think I can, for some reason, zoom into that. But it's actually going to show you that you're coming in, you go into the mixer, you're checking your policy, you go to the ingress gateway, you call the product review, you get the details, you get the reviews, and you get the ratings. So you can see your dialectic graph there. So it's a good way to search in, look at individual telemetry items and see what's up with that. So the other thing you may want to do, there's another view, that view is called service graph. And what we look at in service graph is we can look at a visualization of the components calling each other. So this one's a little bit interesting to take a look at, but what it says is we're actually making the call to our ingress gateway. This is load balancing. We only have a single version of the product page coming in. So we're doing 2.3 requests per second there. What we see is we're not sending any traffic to reviews version 2, and we're not sending any to reviews version 1. We're sending it all to reviews version 3, which is what we set up in our routing rule. It goes out, it's contacting the ratings service. It's all of these guys are sending their telemetry information in, which is how we're getting this information. We get the details in, and we're building the product page and giving an answer back. So it just gives you a visualization of what's going on here, and it really allows you to look at how you have your traffic set up. So here you could see, oh, I'm sending everything to version 3, but I really wanted to send 20% to version 2. You would see that here because you could see in your request per second where traffic was going. You actually can go in and understand the routing, not so much here in the policy side, but it is checking every time to make sure it's within policy and then sending that policy also to telemetry. So that's how you get some of this information, as well as you're checking your policy. Are you allowed to do this? So just another way to visualize the system. Probably spend most of my time over here on the Grafana page, but when I need to do further detailed analysis, I can go to Jaeger or Service Graph as well. And again, those are included with the package. So just a bit of how you do a blue-green deployment and a bit more of how you do some of the visualization of the various components. Okay, so now that we've seen what some of those tools look like, what we see here is how to do some updates of a service to your customer and some of the control that you can also get out of Istio that makes this so powerful. So everything that you see on here hasn't changed except for the very left here. What I've done is in my Git, I've checked in a version 1.2. It's automatically gone through my continuous integration pipeline, done all my automated tests. It's now been approved that it's passed all my testing, my QA, and management has approved it to go ahead and be deployed. So I automatically deploy it in the same pod as I have my version 1.1. Okay? So what I'll do then is I'll actually go in, again, via a text file, via a YAML file, and I'm going to make a simple revision. So in the first one here, what you see is you're going to send 100% of the traffic to, this is what we call a blue-green deployment. So this would be version 1 would be the blue one, and version 2 configuration would be the green one. And you can kind of see the version 2 there. So blue takes 100% of the traffic. So what I've done is I've built a route filter, and it says send 100% to version blue, right? And 0% to version 2, which is my green. All I have to do is apply a new file, and that one says send 50% to blue and 50% to green, and now I'm testing my version 2. Actually, you wouldn't do 50-50. You do more like you see in the bottom block here, where it says 2% goes to my my green version, so I can test it out. But eventually, you can get it to 50-50. Then you can get it to 100%, send everything to green. But oh, wait a minute! If I find out that my latency has gotten too high, I can just, blue is still running, I can just simply point my traffic back to blue, which I know worked before, right? So this is what they call a blue-green. Blue is the known good configuration. Green's your new code. If you've got any problems, you can simply roll back. So what does it look like when we try to do some of these? So I'm going to try to show this a little bit. But one of the things you're doing here is you're actually doing something we call test in prod or test in production, to where I go ahead and I test it on my test network, but my test network isn't 100% of my production network. I'm actually going to test it again in my production network and make sure I don't run into any problems before I push everybody onto it. So let's see what this would look like. Let's go ahead and do a quick demo of versioning software via Istio and Kubernetes. I'd like to show you now how we actually do some of our blue-green deployments and some of our test in prod sort of capabilities that Istio provides us. So if you see this is just a lab environment I have working with a Minikube. And what's going to happen is we have a Python web server, and it's going to answer, it's going to build a page for us. And in the background, we have a Node.js server serving our ratings. We have a Ruby on Rails server with our details. Our Python calls that. But what's interesting is we're going to be able to version our reviews. So what this looks like is when I initially start up, the application, all I've got here is no stars, right? So version 1 of this, we've got no stars. Version 2, we're going to roll out, it's going to have stars. They're going to be black stars. And then we're going to decide that in version 3, we really want red stars. So this is the page that will come up. And what we'll do is we'll go back here and we're going to look at setting up how we modify some of these traffic rules. So the first thing we're going to do is look at what our rules will be. So right now we have 100% of our traffic running to version 1, which is no stars. So to test this, when I roll out version 2, what I will probably want to do is have a small group actually test this version. So in this instance, I'm going to say, hey, match, if you make a match, and that match says that the header end user is exactly Jason, then route him to version 2. Otherwise, route everybody to version 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and apply this. We're going to apply this new role. And if we go back here to our application and we refresh it, then you see we still have no stars down here. But if I go and sign in, let's sign in as Jason and his password. When I sign in, it'll relaunch the page, this time as user Jason. And we have the version 2 with the black stars. Okay. Again, if I reload this, we still have the black stars, but if I sign out and I'm no longer Jason, you'll see I lose the stars, and if I refresh this, there's still no stars. Okay, so now you can see how I can go in and test by individual user. I could go in and test by a group tag. Let's say my dev team wants to test it. But the other neat thing about this is I can do what we call A/B testing or blue-green testing, and I can take some of the traffic and move it to the new version while I keep the old version up and running. And it's really simple to back out to the old version then. So on my A/B testing, let's do a 50%. So what this says, as we read this, and my virtual service again is going to say, okay, go to the reviews, version 1, and give it 50%. But I also want to try my version 3 with 50%. Okay, so now I'm doing a 50-50 split. I can send half the users to one, half the users to the other. So we'll go ahead and we'll configure that, and then we'll run back to our application here. So now if I reload it, I got the version 1. If I reload it again, let's see what I get. I got a version 1. Well, it's not a 50-50 split, but it's actually a traffic randomization of it. And let's see if I can pop a version 3. And it's reloading. And there was an error. That's not good. If I reload again, you see I get version 3. And I reload again, I get version 1, no stars. And I reload again, and I get a 502 error. And so I'm hitting this pretty hard. And see if I can't get another reload here. So I'm seemingly getting some errors. Well, that's not good. So why don't we go ahead and push 100% of our traffic to version 3. I'll go ahead and apply that rule. I can look at my virtual service. I have one running. I can output that virtual service. It says send everybody to version 3. So let's see what my... Okay, so now it comes up. It'll be version 3. And if I try again, it's still version 3. Okay, so let's go back and, that's how you version software. And you can start to see how some of this would be pretty powerful. As you automate this, you could build web pages, and you could allow actually the software deployers to see their code, deploy their code, and each one of those is just backed by a simple text file that you've written so that they can't go outside their bounds. And you can give them a big red panic button to roll back as well, and have your production managers, your code managers actually do the rollout, rollback functions, but in a controlled manner and within the policies set by security and your office of the CIO. One other thing to show here is once you start to roll this out and you start to get this telemetry, you can actually take a pretty decent look at what does the network look like. So I wanted to show this tool as well. This is a quick demo of what the Weave is, the version I've loaded. There are other versions. We've seen that ACI can actually run here, those types of things. But this is just Weave's tool and what you can do to kind of see some of the what's going on in the network. So let's take a look at this.